Okay, being 6:07 PM, we will call to order the Manchester Essex Regional School District School Committee meeting for February 7th, 2023. We will begin the meeting with public comment. We have two people here in person. Would either of you care to make a public comment? And while you think on that, anyone at home, if you'd like to make a public comment, is the chat open?
Chat is open.
Chat's open. Please put your name and address, or name and town at least, in the chat, and we'll get to you after. Please stand up, state your name, and do we need the town or the address or just the
Just
town?
the address.
It's the address.
2-minute limit? Yeah, just,
I think 3 is what we've been going with.
so Ken Warnock, 5 Running Ridge, Manchester. Wanted to just come see the results of the budget, process. Past 6 years, prior 6 years on the school committee, past 4 years have had a year-on-year increase in guilt with spending the reserve. So I'm glad to see there is a correction, being made here, especially over those 4 years. I think it's been 7 years since the last override or correction that went on. There's been a lot of intervening things with big healthcare increases and inflation. So just here to express my support for your work and glad to see that we're moving to get back to where we should be. For the students and the communities.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you for your past service as well.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to make a public comment?
Sure.
Okay.
So Annie Cameron, Essex. Just some things that kind of came to me after the FinCom meeting in Essex recently. I just, in terms of messaging, I think that was one of the things that kind of came out of that meeting was, you know, what are you asking for? Why? What is the benefit? I want to make sure that you are all aware of the fact that there are people looking for reasons to say no, so.
If you're at home, please mute.
Don't give people reasons to vote no, on your budget. I think there were some interesting things that came up at that FinCom meeting, and I think, Jake would probably speak to some of those, but, I worry about this 3-year adjustment thing. I think we need to stop saying that because I don't think that it's true. And I don't know what happens after year 3, like how that works. I was also thinking about what I would be asking Avi if I were sitting at the table. One of those things might be, is there a way of restoring something over time? Or do we have to, you know, it's kind of the, do I have to eat everything this year or can I take bites in the next years, which is, you know, the reverse of what we do, right? We reduce by bits every year and then we never put it back. So is there a way of putting back over time? I'm just trying to think about different strategies. And I'm not feeling good about doing a debt exclusion or a capital exclusion plus an override. I think that's not a good strategy, especially in Essex. I just think, you know, figure out a way of it being one or the other. I just don't think that's a good strategy. And I know that you had a workshop and maybe you've already come to this conclusion. Again, the late bus, I don't think the usage merits the reinstatement of it. I always wanted to look to you, Pam, for like, what do you want to fight? What do you want me to fight for? And I think that those are the things that we need to start teasing out and talking about. I'm happy to see that I don't have any more kids in the school. Ann doesn't have any kids in the school. Your kids are just about to be gone. And there aren't any other parents here to talk about this. This is not good. You know, what are we fighting for? What's the narrative? What do you want to do here? And I, you know, happy to, you know, light the torch and start fighting for this, but I want to know what you're fighting for, because if you're not fighting for it, I'm not going to show. You know what I mean? So that's all I got.
Thank you.
And the other thing that I learned from you is that this is your high water mark.
Right.
Like tonight is your high water mark. You could always reduce after the fact.
Thank you.
I learned a lot from you.
Yes.
Very wise.
Agreed. Thank you, Annie. There's only one more person here in person. Would you like to make a public comment? Okay. Is anyone joining us online? Is there anyone in the chat currently?
I am.
I can't, I don't have
Can you hear
visual
me?
access to the chat. Is this Jody?
Sarah Welf, I think.
Who is,
Sarah.
this is Sarah?
Sarah, I'm on the phone. Yeah, is Jody on the phone too?
I'm not sure because I
Jody's in
can't
the
see a
chat.
thing. Okay, Jody's in the chat. Sarah, since you're here on the phone and unmuted, I'm going to take you right now. Go ahead.
Sarah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Sorry to skip in line. I was excited. Sorry, calling in. Don't really know how this works. Anyway, hi everybody. This is Sarah Wolf for Saugonese Creek Road, Essex, former school committee chair. I first of all wanted to thank all of you. I know this is really hard work. It's been another hard year. And last year I was sitting in Teresa's spot trying to guide the committee through a budget decision. And I know how hard this is. Last year we were really in the wake of COVID and under a lot of uncertainty, not even knowing how we were going to pay our existing COVID bills. So things have certainly come a long way. Last year we also had a lot of, there was also a lot of miscommunication among some of the town leadership. There were a lot of rumors going around. There was a real lack of trust. And I think we've really, really taken a lot of time to get beyond that and get past that. And I think that by the time we had our town meeting vote last year, I think we were in a good place. And I know that you guys have worked really hard this year to build those bridges and make sure that we're in a good place. Last year we made cuts for the first time. We made that really substantial cut in the foreign language department. It was a really, really hard decision, but we knew that we needed to really trim back the budget because we knew that we needed that support from town leadership. At that time, the town of Essex was really not sure that people were going to come out and support the budget. I think it's really important to note that people in the town of Essex and the town of Manchester did come out to support the budget. In Essex, they came out to support the budget despite some fake news that was being spread through the mailboxes. And in the town of Manchester, they came out to support the budget despite people being very, very angry about the cuts. So I really think that we're in a good place because I think that the leadership in both towns understands how much people in our towns really support our public schools. They want strong schools. After COVID, they realize how much they need strong schools and how much services the schools really provide. So tonight, again, thank you for being there. I just want to remind you to take your time, deliberate carefully, ask good questions, but know that we have put in the time over the last years to work with the towns to find a path forward. So I think that no matter what you decide tonight, we're going to be in good shape. And thanks again all for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we have Jody in the chat. Is that correct?
That
Jody,
is-
you want to unmute?
Thank you. Is this our only opportunity to speak about the budget tonight?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. One of my concerns is that we don't have our E&D certified yet. And I was doing some research and working with somebody at DESE and at DOR, looking at other districts. There are 88 districts and over 40 of them have certified E&D. And we historically do not get our E&D certified prior to our budget process. And I'm wondering why that is. And the 40 that I'm looking at had their budget certified, put in and certified before the end of fall. And most of them are in the budget size that we are. So that concerns me because that is a piece of the pie that we don't see. And we generally see it after we voted on a budget. My other question is regarding administrative costs and average cost per pupil for administrative costs. It looks like our administrative costs are 8 times higher than the average in the state. So I'm wondering if that's a place that we need to look at going forward. I know, we are where we are, but we have constraints. And I think that being partners in a district is important to look at what we can afford. I'll go back to my analogy. We can feed everybody filet mignon, but when the price is too high, we have to cut back at some point. So we've got to find ways to shrink the budget and make it match our enrollment. And when Teresa spoke last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting, she talked about efficiencies, and then she was very quick to say, but we're not going to see these until 2024. So again, I'm a huge supporter of the district. Have been, always have been, on the regional study group, on the first school committee, vice chair, negotiated contracts. I get it. But at some point, we've got to look at our program and say, does it fit anymore, or doesn't it? And I am going to have a hard time selling this, and I'm going to be asked to sell it. I'm going to be asked to sell an override, whether it's for fields or a functional override. I'm still not feeling it, and I need to be made to feel comfortable about it. So I guess I'm concerned.
Thank you, Jody. As you know, this isn't a hearing at this point, it's just public comment, but I feel pretty secure that Pam's going to address the questions that you have for sure. So thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the chat? Guy Bradford, you want to unmute?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Guy. Yes.
Great, my name, so thank you. My name is Guy Bradford, and I am a selectman for the town of Essex. I'd like to make several comments on your upcoming vote on the school budget. But as a selectman, first I'll need to make a couple of disclaimers. First, I'll be expressing my opinion only, which doesn't necessarily represent the opinions or the position of the board of selectmen as a whole. And second, these comments represent the same views and opinions I expressed last night at our public Board of Selectmen meeting, and don't represent any new information that isn't already available to the public. So with that in mind, I'd like to make two comments or recommendations to the committee as you deliberate and vote on the fiscal year 24 school budget. First, I encourage you again to adopt a budget which provides for lack of a better term, a minimalist set of level services, and does not include either reinstated or new programs which were not included in the fiscal 23 budget. As the committee knows, the town of Essex will be attempting to pass an operational override in its May town meeting, as well as in a subsequent ballot, to account for cost increases above the 2.5% levy limit for the next 3 years. Whatever steps can be taken to minimize the size of the override ask without affecting the strength of the core curriculum offered by the district will certainly increase the likelihood of its passage. Second, and really in the same spirit, I encourage the committee to commit now or in the very near future to begin a strategic review of the structure and design of the school's curriculum, with the aim of giving greater efficiency and cost effectiveness to the program, but again, without affecting the quality and content of its course offerings. I realize that these changes, if made, can't really occur overnight and will require lead time to implement. However, I'm hopeful that would they be introduced in the fiscal 25 and 26 school years, and consequently, they could have a positive impact on the size of the operational override ask in our Essex, in the coming Essex town meeting in May. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Is there anyone else in the chat?
Lindsay Banks.
Lindsay, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. I respect and appreciate all of the hard work everyone has put in on this process. I did want to bring up two probably irrelevant for this year programmatic losses that we've had in previous years, in the hopes that even if it's not brought back this year, it will be a part of and stay a part of future conversations about what we're offering students in our district. So I wanted to bring up the cut that Sarah Wolf mentioned of the foreign language program for elementary school. I think we need to try to bring that back if and when it's remotely possible. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Lindsay, we just lost you for a second. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but our
Can you hear me now?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
Here we go. Got her back.
Sorry. Okay, so I was talking about foreign language program and how crucial elementary foreign language is for language learning development to hit that window. And then also just considering the demographics of our towns, how important it is for children to have an opportunity to engage with other people, other cultures, other languages. I also wanted to call attention to the lack of a budget in the library at the elementary or at the middle and high school levels, and the fact that our elementary librarian is splitting time between 2 elementary schools, which really isn't sustainable. And really, I emailed school committee about this today, how important it is, especially now in this age of social media and misinformation, that students are learning about media literacy, credible sources, critical thinking, accessing rich and diverse fiction and nonfiction sources so that they can, again, engage with topics and issues that can prepare them for life after graduation. And funding a library is vital, especially at middle and high school levels, for students and for our democracy and accessing like fully information to create fully informed citizens. So I didn't want to let those 2 past cuts also kind of go unnoticed for this discussion and future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. The chat. Is there anybody on the phone who would like to make public comment? If so, please unmute yourself and say your name and address. Hearing none further, we will close the public comment section and thank you all who were willing to share today.
And can we just get a double check? Somebody shout back at us if you
Yeah.
can hear us at home. We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Excellent. Whew. Thank you all. Okay, student report. We have Diego with us.
So this week I have kind of an event that's going to be happening at the high school, which I'm pretty pumped to talk about. It's going to be the district's STEAM showcase night, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And it's like between the middle school and the high school, and it's going to be an interdisciplinary showcase, which features, projects that students are doing in their own classes. And then it also pulls from local businesses, companies, and people in the community that want to come in and kind of like show what they're doing related to science, technology, art, engineering, and math. And then there will also be some former students in Manchester, Essex who are working in those fields as well. We're going to come back and kind of like, show students here what we've been doing. And there's going to be a lot of pretty cool stuff that's happening there. I have a small list on my phone. It's a preliminary list. There's might be some changes, but I thought I would point out kind of some cool things. One of them was a middle school student named Kiki Campbell. And I guess, according to what Miss Amelia was telling me, it's pretty cool. She was trained by a Harvard, I don't know what the word would be, but they specialize in monarch butterflies. And the student is like a total like connoisseur of the butterflies, and she's really into the conservation of, monarch butterflies. And on the school ground, she's helping to grow milkweed to bring back the butterflies, and it's pretty cool. So she's gonna be doing a whole presentation about that, which I think is pretty awesome considering it's a middle school student. Another thing I thought was pretty cool was, let's see, I mean, there's so many. I think one that was good was probably the robotics. The robotics team is going to be coming in and showing off what they're doing, which I think like is always really amazing. I see them in the 4th of July parade with the robot that they build. And like, that's always like, it blows my mind that they're able to literally build a robot. I think that's pretty cool. So that should be exciting. Let's see, Gloucester Marine Genomics Institute will be coming and kind of showing what they're doing. Let's see, Marco Caper, he's a former student in Manchester, Essex. He's doing research at Mass General Hospital right now. And he's going to be coming in and talking about internship opportunities for students and kind of, potential things that they could be doing, which I think is pretty awesome to see former students come back and show what they've done with what they learned in Manchester. And then kind of one more, which I think would be pretty cool, is there's a freshman student named Luca Fortunato, and he makes these really beautiful aquascapes, which if you haven't seen them, there's a ton of them upstairs in the biology room, but they're like these like jars filled with water, and they have like plants growing in them and all sorts of stuff. So I think that should be pretty amazing. And then there's going to be Black Earth Compost is going to be there. Let's see. I think Mr. Warnock, you're going to be there with Medtronics, right? Showing off some stuff. So that should be pretty cool.
Oh, you're tapped in for the most obscure details.
NOA, someone from NOAA will be there discussing sustainable fishing and marine biology locally. And then, I mean, there's going to be tons of other like art and science related things. But it's going to be open to the community. So all the students will be able to come. I hope that some of you will be able to come. It's on March 30th. And you're just kind of, going to be able to see what the science, math department, art department, engineering classes are doing in the school. I know my AP chemistry class will kind of have a table and we'll be doing some sort of demonstration. Science team, they'll also be doing a demonstration. HOSA, Future Healthcare Professionals of America, they're going to have a little table. Math team's going to have a table. Miss Petrie's 8th grade science class, they're making art out of single-use plastics of like marine animals locally, and they're going to have a whole display, which is going to be pretty cool. And that's just some of the things. So I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be good to see, just kind of what we do here, because I know sometimes people wonder that. And I'm really excited for it. And I hope that you all can make it.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I want to talk about today.
Awesome. Thank you. That sounds incredible. On the calendar. Anyone have questions for Diego?
Can I just tag on to that? I was impressed by the middle school green team doing the recycling of soft plastics. It's always been a issue that we have always had to throw them away, and that they found a way to collect those and find a recycling use for them in products. It's pretty awesome. So I'm glad they're continuing that, and just to continue that theme of things we're doing around STEM. So kudos to the middle school green team.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Well, I have one question for you, Diego. So you know that the budget is the big topic of conversation for us for the past couple months. Are students like eagerly anticipating what's going to happen tonight? Are they logging in and or are they just waiting for your report back? Like, how is this going at the student level?
I would say, I think people really talk about it when you look at cuts that are going to impact them. So like, a big thing last year among the students was the fields, and I know that several students came to make public comment about the fields and kind of their experience. So I think that's something people care a lot about. I think that the foreign language department was another big thing that students really felt strongly about, that being cut. But I would say that overall, students really care when things are on the chopping block, and it's kind of like, all right, you're looking at what, how do I say it? Like things that will negatively impact them. And I think sometimes it can also be hard for students to understand why certain things, we just have something, sometimes there just has to be cuts. And I think sometimes it's hard for students to understand why certain things are cut and why other things aren't cut. And I think that sometimes that's not made super clear to the student body. It's just kind of like, it's here one moment and it's gone the next. And it's kind of like, there's like a group of people behind the curtain, like pulling the strings, which I don't know, I don't think that, because I come here
Right.
everyone's super nice and there's reasoning behind everything, but sometimes people think it's it's kind of like this evil empire is just making cuts, which I tell everyone it's not true.
Oh no, we know what you're
everyone cares. It's just sometimes, it is what it is. But I would say right now, not really a ton of people are talking about it. Not a ton of people are super invested in it. But I think that once you find things to cut, it's definitely going to be talked about. One thing that people did talk about, which was really like positive, and like, I don't know if this has anything to do with the budget last year, but the fact that there's so many more math teachers this year, if there was one decision that I think was made from last year to this year that really impacted the students in the most positive way and that everyone benefited from, it was the fact that there were more math teachers brought in. And that obviously this year, a teacher had to go on leave. And then because there were so many people, it didn't really affect the classes in like a negative way at all. And everyone was able to keep learning. So I would say if there's one thing that people really, really liked as a change, it was having enough staff to be able to teach all the students, even if another teacher is out.
Thank you. Erica, go ahead.
Was there any reaction or comments on the new program of studies? Did people, do you sense any enthusiasm for the new courses?
I actually did. I think a lot of people are really excited about it. I know like even I'm looking at my courses for next year and kind of like seeing what I want to take. And I thought that some of the new courses were pretty interesting, especially the forensics class.
Once upon a crime.
Once Upon a
I
Crime.
want to take it.
Yeah, it's like
We all want to take it.
I know it's pretty fun. And then I would also say that the change to the science program, that's something that like I was really happy about. And then I guess I kind of like selfishly, like for me, I wish it was like that when I went to school, because now like offering AP Physics 2 and then doing honors physics at sophomore year and being able to double up with chem and that, and then taking AP2 junior year and then being able to take AP Physics C senior year, like I just think that makes so much more sense for everybody. And I think it's going to help people out a lot. It's going to give students that want to take the physics path, it's going to make life a lot easier for them. Because I went into AP1 this year, no physics background at all. And like, I think taking my first physics class in junior year just like was not good for me. And I know a bunch of people in my grade feel the same way about that. So I would say that the changes there were really, really positive as well.
Thank you.
For
Anyone
sure.
else have questions for Diego? I don't want to forget that you guys are sitting here behind my head. All right, well, thank you. Are you sticking around or are you?
I think I'm gonna head out tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We
Yeah,
always
thanks,
appreciate you
Diego.
being here. All right, Chairman's report. So I'm gonna start the chairman's report. I'm gonna do this a little bit, first I'll start by saying that since we last met, on behalf of the committee, I responded to email from one concerned citizen. We just got Lindsay's today, so that hasn't been replied to yet, but I know we all received it. Also replied to a request from a reporter from the Gloucester Daily Times, and that article went out yesterday. And I also made a visit to the Friends of EES group, formerly known as EES-PTO, last Thursday, and the Essex Elementary School Council yesterday. And I will visit their corollaries at Memorial as soon as I'm able to get to those. So that is what I have done in an official capacity in that way. And so my chairman's report tonight, it's my turn. We've gone through the whole group. It's my turn to read the norms. And I'm going to read two because I was doing the math about how many we have left. And I'm going to take one little jump here because I think they're really pertinent to what we're doing tonight. So one is base our decisions on available information, vote with our convictions, avoid bias, and uphold and support the decisions of the majority of the committee once a decision is made. And the second is honor our agreed upon operating protocols and norms and agree to take responsibility for reminding one another through the chair when discussions get off track, personal, or redundant. We will need all of this tonight. So I actually am going to do something, Pam, you might have just been joking, but I am just going to give a tiny analogy to lighten the mood as we start things tonight, as we jump into this budget discussion. About 14 years ago right now, I was pregnant with my first child. And I have to tell you, I despised pregnancy. It did not come naturally to me. I didn't enjoy it. I also didn't enjoy it with my second child. But with my first child, I was going through pregnancy, right? You go through and what are you doing? I'm looking ahead and planning and getting all of the information I possibly can and taking everything in, and I'm trying to hear from every expert and everybody who has anything to say, and everybody has an opinion and they're going to give it to you and all of that, right? And you work through that for 9 months. And then comes like the big day, right? But after the big day, everyone's like, oh man, how was it? How was that day? How was actual delivery? And I'm like, it was the best day of my life because there's an end. And I feel like this is like that. There was all of the difficulty of labor and delivery in that day, but I wasn't leaving that hospital without a baby having exited my body. And so I feel like we have spent so many months building up to this. And tonight it might be messy and it might be difficult. It might be difficult. It might be difficult in some ways and easy in some ways. But tonight we will have voted a budget. We will have done that. It is a high water mark, as noted. It can be refined down over the things. But after tonight, we will be moving forward with the business of caring for a baby and a child, right? So I'm really hopeful for that because it has been a lot for all of us. And so I think that as we get started, we keep in mind these norms, that we're working together. This is a collaborative process, not just with all of our partners, but as a group here together. So Pam and Avi are going to lead us through, their presentation of where we're at right now. We've done all the buildup. We've asked all the questions. We've received all the input up to and including public comment tonight. And tonight we have a really specific job in front of us, and that's the job we'll do tonight. So with that I close my chairman's report. Consent agenda. Okay, so the consent agenda tonight includes the acceptance of warrants for vouchers 1038, 1039, and 1040. Also the minutes for our budget workshop last week, 131-23, and the student travel request for DECA to travel to Boston March 9th through 11th, and then for those who qualify to go on to Orlando April 22nd through 25th. I know I have corrections and comments that I wasn't able to get to Maria in time for changes for approval today. So
And they're gonna go to Amy because we had a
they're
sub
gonna go
in.
to Amy. Oh,
That's why they're
right.
so different.
That's right. Okay, got it. They're gonna go to Amy. So do you mind if we approve the minutes at the next meeting so that those corrections can be made?
And
Okay,
we can take all the inputs because it's different styles.
okay, got it. Okay. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda for the acceptance of the warrants as stated and the student travel. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Kate moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Chris seconds it. Any discussion about the warrants or the student travel request? Hearing none. All in favor? That's unanimous. The motion carries. Thank you.
Note in the minutes that that's voucher 1038 to 1040. If you said that already, I
did say it.
apologize. Okay,
And he'll be in there.
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Got it.
My bad.
No problem, no problem. Subcommittee reports. Facilities, we did not meet. We're meeting this
Right.
week. Did you want to say anything or do you want to, because it says report here.
Reporting that you're meeting this week.
Yeah.
We're reporting that we're meeting this week. We'll be meeting this week.
Field follow-up.
Excellent. Finance Subcommittee, I asked some questions, but we took down the posting for the original because the scheduling got confused. We did meet for collaboration last Friday with updated numbers and field strategy, but I think they're going to cover everything. Is there anything that we feel like we need to, that isn't going to be covered tonight?
It might make sense to jump in and tuck that into the budget discussion so we don't go.
That's what, yeah.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
on the facilities, any update on the Habib report?
Yes, that's what we want to discuss at the meeting. It's kind of in final draft form and we intend to bring it to the March 7th meeting for final.
Awesome,
But we'll be going over that on Friday.
thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for staying on that. Policy Subcommittee, Erica and Jake.
So we did meet, we took a look at the graduation policy. So we're looking at changing the language of that policy so that it effectively makes the policy reside in the program of studies. It's still a school committee policy, but it would reside there.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to have it in two places, which we currently do, which is, I think it's happened in the past. We did confirm that, we found all the references where things have been voted in the past, so we're all good there. We just need to check on a few things to make sure that modified language makes sense. In terms of where we are in working on things, we are still underway with the reserve policy. And the graduation requirements are the two active ones. We have kind of tentatively lined up a working agreement, which follows the contract negotiations that are happening, a civil rights audit that may impact a few policies. That should be relatively quick once we get on it. And then there's also the grievance contract policy, which is following, again, the negotiations as well, that we'll have a piece in there. Other things that are on the plate, but unlikely to happen this year, we've been talking about looking at a flag policy, the calendar, a logo policy, potentially articulate something around school councils and our relationship with them. And then eventually a wellness policy, which when the state gets to the point of finalizing comprehensive health standards, that would kind of fold in there. And that's where we'd also look at kind of food service parts when we look at kind of that broader wellness policy.
Okay. Anyone have questions? I have one, but I don't need to be the only one. So my question was just the food service situation, because that was work that the previous committee had started, and I just want to make sure we don't get lost in that. So the task for this year was, had been intended to be doing research about what other districts are offering in comparison to what we do and all of that. So are we tabling that for now and moving forward with a contract, or are we?
We have, and Avi and Pam can speak to this too, but we have the option of renewing those year by year.
Okay.
And the task of doing that research is not a policy task. It's really a kind of a contract and services task. And so we felt these other policy things needed to happen before we got there. So
Regardless of where it resides going forward, there is no bandwidth to conduct
Yeah.
site visits this spring.
Yeah, clearly.
Interest, desire, there's just, I think our plates are expanding.
Yep.
In terms of deliverables that have higher priority.
Got it. That makes sense. So
Yep.
maybe we can put that in the summer parking lot for now to, when we prioritize.
Figure out where it can
At
go.
that point, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else have questions? No? Okay, negotiations.
We are meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, you can, it should say report. You can report that you're meeting tomorrow.
We are meeting
Alright.
tomorrow and negotiations are ongoing.
Thank you. All right, superintendent's report.
Okay, Diego covered the STEAM showcase. Just want to note, we're gonna have a civics showcase. It launched last year and there'll be a reprise of it this year. That's usually toward the end of the year. So we will get you more details about participating in that when the time comes up. And Diego offered the invitation. We hope to see you at the STEAM showcase. We also are getting ready Michelle Magana is prepping International Week. That has been a great opportunity for members in the past to participate. So if you have interest, let me know and I will connect you with her. So you can get the details and we can work you into the schedule. So we'd love to see you participate in that as well. I guess top news this week is, I think everyone has heard, if not, Patricia Puglisi, the high school principal, will be stepping down at the end of the year. Take advantage of an opportunity in Linfield to become their next high school principal. That leaves us with another search to do. So we are getting that, I am getting that prepped and ready to launch a posting by the end of the week. It will follow the same process. If you've been following the curriculum director emails, that's the blueprint. We will do exactly the same. We'll survey the direct community. We will have a team of parents, students, and faculty to serve as the screening group. And we will bring finalists in for elongated interviews with people. We are in mid-process with the curriculum director search. We begin interviews on Thursday. We had a pretty strong pool of candidates. They are smaller than they used to be, but the quality of candidates seems to be quite high. Just about everyone in the pool was certified and qualified to some degree, and we pulled the top 5. But it's open-ended. So if we get other quality candidates as we go, we can continue to interview until we find our just right fit. And I jumped principal to the top of the line, but high school principal is at the top of the line, but we do have the Essex search that will begin and run concurrently to the middle, to the high school principal search. Hopefully I didn't jinx myself by saying. So we'll be looking, looking ahead to next year, and we'll have 3 new leadership members on the team. We can talk over the next months about what that means for some of our plans and our timelines and our hopes for executing changes. Typically, best practice says when you onboard new leaders, we take some time to evaluate our surroundings, create an entry plan, get to know the environment, and then create an action plan from there. So we may have to take a pause on some of our ambitions, but I'm sure some of them will be able to continue to move forward because some of it is work similar to what's being done in other districts. So lots of new unknowns. It's going to be, high school principal is a critical role, elementary principal, critical role, and curriculum director. So we've got some important work to do over the next few months. And that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, just that.
Just that. Just that.
All right, well, thank you very much. Okay, so we are on to continued business, starting with the Memorial School Building project funding, the bond anticipation notes. Do you want to give us a lead in here before we do, or do we want to?
I can
How-
give a
how-
very brief summary
Okay.
that will hopefully not put people to sleep, and allow us to save our budgetary energy for
Yeah.
the big operating budget. So this is a routine continuation of the existing short-term borrowing that we've had for the Memorial School Building project. We have essentially permanently borrowed with bonds the portion that we know will become our share. We do not, the portion that is going to be paid by MSBA, we would never bond. So we're only bonding and borrowing things that we know the MSBA will not pick up. So we've already got, looking at my notes here, $38.5 million of funding that we've raised on permanent borrowing. And so these bond anticipation notes are a small amount right now, $1.3 million, to tide us over until such time the MSBA gives us its final reimbursement. When that happens, we know what our final share will be. So that strategy was put into place with the middle school, high school, which if you look at the bonds we issued there, we had a big one, a medium-sized one, and then a small little sliver one, which was temporarily, we used bands until we bonded 1.964 million for the high school. Similarly, with this project, we've got the 35 million, the 3.5 million, and now we're down to this 1.3 million little sliver while we're waiting for the final reimbursements for MSBA. We started the strategy a year ago. We don't have final numbers from MSBA. It could take some time, even though the project is nearly wrapped up. So we're really just voting to continue the strategy that we've kind of worked through a year ago. There's really no new news other than that we borrow for 1 year at a time. Interest rates are up slightly. But not, the amount of money that we're going to be paying for this is $51,000. All of this is excluded from Proposition 2.5 back when the project was voted. So, and the interest rate that's on this is 3.18%. So, all things considered, still low cost, even though it's ticked up from where we were a year ago, for sure, in the higher interest rate environment. So, that's the overview. There's a lot more detail. I don't think anyone needs me to get into it, but I'd be happy to answer questions. If not, then I would just ask that we move to a vote using the form of vote that was provided to us by bond counsel. Bond counsel represent us to make sure that we are following all the procedures. This is tax exempt debt. So we get an exemption for this because we're tax exempt, in the municipal bond market. So that has some benefits to us and gets more favorable rates. So, we have to make sure that we're just complying with a lot of the legal requirements. And so that's how the votes are structured. And so I submitted the form of votes as part of the meeting packet. And it goes through a description of what the bonds are, how much we're borrowing, which we talked about, the fact that we issued a disclosure of our financial position to do this, the fact that it will be tax exempt, and that we'll follow up with any future disclosures that are required by the SEC, that sort of thing. And that all of this vote happened in a public meeting. That's kind of a basic summary, but the motion takes on the language as submitted. I think that will achieve our requirement. And before we do that, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so are there clarifying questions about this, and then we'll have discussion within the motion. Anyone need clarifying questions on this? Okay, then I have the language that Avi has provided me by email.
Yeah.
So I move to approve the sale of $1.3 million bond anticipation notes using the form of vote presented by bond counsel and provided to school committee in advance of the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Jake seconds. Any discussion? I've gotten this. I've already gone through my questions, which was, this is
Great.
very standard, very by the book.
Yeah, and consistent with also the past borrowings and the past procedures, it's very much the same. And we will enter the vote language as presented into the minutes.
Right.
You have a question?
Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. Can you direct us to see how this bond
Yes.
how is reflected on this page?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So on the capital budget, which is where we have about 2.5 excluded debt, we have the interest cost, which is the amount that will be our expense, which is the 51,457 under bond anticipation notes. So the bottom half is the expense, the top half is the revenue. And you can see there's a 51,457. That is the net interest cost to the district. And it will be covered up above in the revenue side through assessments to the two towns. In the initial draft, we had done an estimate only at the tentative budget side. It was a little bit lower. And we've updated the number based on the actual interest that will be owed next year.
Thank you.
No, thanks for asking. I'm glad you asked.
Any discussion? Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will take all in favor. Anyone opposed? Oh, that was unanimous. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for making that so easy to digest in the packet information.
Great.
Okay, budget workshop, vote to approve fiscal year 24 operating and capital budget. Pam, would you like to?
Yes.
Would you like to say anything?
So what I'd like to do is walk through this packet. It's not that long, but I think it'll set the stage and answer some questions before we begin deliberation and take any other questions that may come up as a byproduct of the introduction. Okay, so in your packet, you have an overview sheet. You've got two scenarios. You've got a third sheet, which is a small chart, which looks to address some of the, I think what Annie brought up, things that have come out. How can we incrementally put them back or put them back with a new look?
Yeah.
Or consistent with new priorities. And then you have two versions of the budget, one of which you'll determine tonight. One represents level services, one represents level services with a few small add backs in it. Okay, and we just went through the capital budget, which is the last page. So let's just go through where we are now versus where we were when we last met on Tuesday of last week, because we did have some changes between Tuesday and Friday when this went out to you and when I kind of zeroed in on the final recommendation. So to start off, I'm just going to say that we've taken it down from 4 scenarios to 2 scenarios, level services and reinstate and stabilize. My recommendation is going to be for the reinstate and stabilize budget to go forward to represent our FY24 budget for next year. I think it is a good compromise between putting back some things that were important, that are important to the program and are important for building forward. It keeps us on solid financial footing, but is also respectful of the constraints that the towns are signaling to us are an ongoing problem for them. The stabilization budget comes in at $98,000 greater than the level services budget. So that's the total differential between the two budgets. And when if you roughly call that $100,000, that's about $60,000 more for Manchester and about $40,000 more for Essex in total. So that's the scope of the add back when we're talking about the difference between the two budgets. So things that have changed since last budget. We've had an improved healthcare rate assumption. So our HIAC group met and the broker has reported that his current estimate is 6.93 for healthcare rate renewal. That yields about $250,000 in potential reductions, which if you look on your budget, one of the yellow highlighted lines is called longevity expanded Negotiations, longevity, expanded effort. We've moved that savings to that line as a management reserve fund for the settlement of the contract. We don't know for certain that it will be that amount of money, but we estimate that it will be within that ballpark. We are still in open negotiation, so there is no final number at this point. Since last discussion, we have found out that the Endicott Fellows Program anticipates a shortage of teacher fellows for next year. We have 4 teacher fellows in the budget. To offset the potential loss of that, we are going to need to add 2 special education TAs to the budget. So what we're going to do is hope that we can come up with 2 fellows and then backstop that with 2 TAs. If you recall, TAs, special education TAs are prescribed by individual education plans. So these individuals are here to provide services, services that we must comply with. Our intent was to use the fellows to do so. If the fellows aren't available, we will have to put either the full 4 TAs back in the budget, but we're going to be hopeful that we can split it 2 and 2. So we're still carrying some contract service money to manage the fellow potential. And at this point, we've added 2 direct FTEs to the TA line. We're also looking at, Kate has suggested looking at school choice revenue and trying to grow that back as a way of generating revenue. We're putting in, let me start by saying March is the month that we deep dive on school choice. We'll start with a preliminary look on the 7th and then move to a deeper look on the 21st, usually making a decision by that point, if not the first meeting in April, as to how many heads and where I'm looking to place them for the following year. The $50,000 increased revenue in the school choice line assumes 10 new heads over the replacement of the 3 students will be exiting at the end of this year. So right now that's a total of 13 over our existing population. I think there's plenty of spaces to manage that right now. And our question will be, do we want to grow it beyond that? And we might want to look at that as a multi-year project in a way to defray costs going forward, because we know we are going to have gaps. Either level services or the stabilized budget both have an outlook that has us managing some potential gaps in the out years.
I'm sorry, Kim,
Yeah.
It's not a question, could you repeat what you said about the numbers one more time?
Sure. School choice revenue at $50,000 assumes the replacement of the 3 graduating school choice students plus an additional 10 students to be placed K through 9.
That's what the current.
That's when we go through the budget with the $50,000 represents. Yeah.
Just a clarification, as you have it on the sheet here, it looks like an addition to the budget, but this is revenue, right? So this would actually reduce the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we'll get into that when we go through the other sheets.
So, and just for process for tonight, since we have so much, let's let you get through everything and then we'll take our, unless you can't hear, in which case.
And I can speed up from here. Okay. So those are the key changes that impact assumptions and some movement in the budget lines. All of the budget lines that had changes made to them were highlighted in yellow. So a little bit of background. I think it's worth going back to where we started, which is the beginning of the budget season, and understanding why we're seeking a correction, because we have gone in many different directions and investigated a lot of different things and answered many different questions. But at its heart, this budget correction seeks to replace the use of reserves as revenue. $520,000. That's the key driver. That's the key problem we are trying to solve by bringing in a larger than usual budget ask to both towns. And we're doing that, and the number is larger because we have suppressed the number and worked under the 3.5 assessment agreement for the past 4 years, understanding that it's been difficult to manage apportionment for Essex. So we are not seeking expansion. We are not seeking high-level investment. We are simply seeking to correct a structural revenue problem and be in agreement with our neighbor towns that for the next 3 years, our target assessment is solid at 3.5. So we know how to plan and manage our anticipated shortfalls. The cuts and reductions through the past few years, many of them came through retirement. So the enrollment theme that's been driven through our conversations has been managed incrementally over the years by rolling off staff through retirement and dealing with enrollment reductions where we could find them. What we haven't done is completely restructure things for the purpose of finding efficiency and reducing program to address enrollment. I think that's a more complicated question, and I'll speak to that a little bit later on. What the reinstatement budget seeks to do is put back a couple of small items. I'll go to those in a second. So our 25 and 26 budget, as we look out in the next 2 years, if we hit the 3.5% assessment target, we are anticipating a $200,000 gap to manage in the first year and a $400,000 gap to manage in the third year. So 200,000 in 25 and 400,000 in 26. Keeping in mind that we do still have an open contract with our hope of resolving it in April. So that's open-ended and could have an impact on what our anticipated outcome, what our anticipated management task is in the next few years. How I think we can manage it, why those numbers don't trouble me right now. It's work we've always done. We start every year knowing we have to trim back. Knowing what the target is now, we can come up with a multi-year strategy to manage talent, both onboarding and offboarding, recruiting and hiring, looking for areas to use other resources that we have, such as OPEB to offset unanticipated healthcare costs, and just working to look at some projects around the district and where we can find greater efficiencies in the way we are managing things, not in the program we offer. And that's what I would just like to note. Guy mentioned curriculum. I think it's a common mistake. We are not looking to restructure the curriculum. We just completed a strategic plan, which has given us a blueprint for improving how we do things, but we're not looking for, and I cannot recommend, a financially based restructuring reduction of our course offerings. I will speak to the fact that over the next year, we can look to realign some scheduling for a more efficient use of shared staff throughout the secondary. But I see no evidence in our past work through our strategic planning, working with committees to hire principals, listening to our student body, that there is a desire for a wholesale reduction in our program offerings. Doing it better, doing it with modern intent, being more student-centered, increasing opportunities for authentic learning, and making good on our obligations to be more inclusive, yes. Reducing for the sake of the bottom line, no. The operational budget at this point, it appears, and I guess this, let me preface this by saying, this is information we got from our collaboration group. Everyone reserves the right to change their mind on how they're handling this. But at this point, for this committee's decision-making, Manchester looks to be addressing the override with its levy capacity, looking to address paying their assessment through their available levy capacity. It doesn't appear that they will need an override. Essex appears like they will need an operational override to manage the budget. Again, that's for the town to decide the mechanics of how they're going to address the assessment bill when it arrives. Another piece that we were tracking as something we needed to consider as part of the overall budget, conversations around stabilization and building back reserves, is the fields. At this time, the fields will be funded through borrowing with reserves as a backup plan, meaning working with both towns, it seems to be consensus at this point that we'll seek some type of bond to pay for the fields, and then the towns will, through the capital budget, be billed for their portion of the bond cost over the next few years. We can talk a little bit more about it in March. Does not need to be settled tonight in the mechanics of whether it's a capital exclusion, a debt exclusion, how much is split between the town and the school in Manchester, and what portion of it goes out, and how Essex intends to pay for it after the fact, are all conversations to be had through collaboration and don't need to be addressed or settled at this table. What we need to know, big picture, is that at this point, there is an agreement to seek funding for the fields outside of the reserves to allow the reserves to stay strong, to be prepared to deal with any facilities issues that come up at Essex Elementary, and be prepared, both town and school, for borrowing should we need to go out a little sooner than we intended to for a building project, which leads me to the final piece of the budget, picture discussion. It's our intent to go out for an SOI this spring to begin the process of advocating for a large-scale project for Essex Elementary. Whether it's replacement or renovation, that process will decide it. This is simply an attempt to get in the pipeline to get a formal feasibility study going. So with all those things in mind, the decision tonight is simply to adopt an operating budget for FY24 and a capital budget. The capital budget is very straightforward at this point. The operating budget presents you with two options, both of which we will be able to live with. I would recommend putting back 3 items under the reinstate and stabilize budget. I do think the late bus is a value. $20,000 is our estimate based on, and we can debate. $20,000 is our estimate based on our past billing. It runs at about $90 a day. So whether it's 15, 18, or 20, it's in that ballpark with the $20,000 placeholder will be sufficient to cover it. We really also don't know what gas costs and all of those associated potential increases may be for next year. Why the late bus? I think at the heart, it's an equity issue. When we stopped using the late bus, we weren't having the same conversations that we're having today. And right now we're talking a lot about ensuring access, equal access for all students across the district to programs that exist in one place or another. So we've also increased programming since we removed the late bus. We have an increasing number of after-school activities that take place between the elementary schools, namely the 5th grade play. Even though we didn't have a formal late bus last year, we did bring on the late bus to move kids back and forth for the purpose of the Y play. This year, we've migrated to having one joint 5th grade play, and students need to be able to get back and forth to attend. We have the athletics issue where we have athletic events, athletic practices in both towns. This facilitates movement back and forth between the towns. And I think there's an increased interest in trying to provide an opportunity for Essex Elementary students to have access to the Manchester after-school program, which is just larger, more expanded offerings than the Y is able to do for Essex Elementary alone. It's kind of a matter of numbers. You join them together, it's about 500 kids. Separate them, they're about 220, 250 each. So I think there's opportunity there. I think it's a good investment, and I think it supports all of our families, regardless of their ability or their work schedule, their ability to be here to move their kids after school or their work schedules. So I would advocate for the late bus. I'm also going to advocate strongly to put 0.4 middle school world language back in play. It was a 0.6 reduction overall. It's a split between 0.2 French and 0.4 Spanish, and it's exploratory. Not having the elementary program in place, this would be their first introduction to language, where they get to choose and have a taste of it before they make a final decision going into 7th grade. I shouldn't say final, they can change along the way, but it helps them to experience each and then make a determination on their 7th grade choice. We can staff, because of the U block placement, we can staff 0.2 French from the high school to the middle school. So we don't need to bring on, we can work that into somebody's existing schedule. We cannot staff 0.4 from the high school because of the schedule misalignment, which I'll talk a little bit about later in a few minutes. So we will need to bring back a direct 0.4 to service the program. Then I actually think the most important on this list, second to program, is the facility small cap reinstatement. Jake asked about the Habib report. The Habib report is lengthy, and there are many, many items that are going to need attention over the next few years, not just at Essex Elementary School. The middle high school is getting on, and it needs routine maintenance. The carpets in this room alone need to be addressed. Furniture is starting to wear. There are just routine annual summer projects that we need a funding source for. This is typically the line that goes first when we start to talk about budget reductions. I'm looking at Annie because I can think of, well, let's just take it out of facilities small cap, and if you really need it, you'll fund it from reserves, is typically the line. I think to have a healthy planned budget, we should have it as a recurring line within and funded at $100,000, which is what we went out and lobbied for when we did the override back in the 15-16 timeframe. So I think it's short-sighted to cut that line and not to have a planning ability to ensure that we're doing our routine maintenance to keep our buildings as up to date as possible within each year. Yep.
Did you mean to say 50?
Did I say, what did I
You
say?
said 100.
The whole line is 100, the add back's 50, sorry. Yes, the total line is 100,000. That's what we lobbied for in 15-16. We had pulled it back 50,000 and we're adding it back. So those are my three add backs. The total, when you back out the revenue from school choice, lands you at about $98,000 over level service for a gap of 848 that needs to be funded. Couple of things before we go into questions. So things that aren't in the add back list, but can be addressed going forward in a more of an incremental way. This year, in anticipation of next year, we are working on restructuring the music program. Let me rephrase. We're looking at restructuring staffing the music program, and through that restructuring, coming up with enough resources to fund a performing arts coordinator. TBA on the total structure of it, but I would look to something similar to a department chair, where there's some teaching component and also an administrative responsibility for organizing after-school programming, concerts, and performances throughout the year. We think we can manage the integration of an additional 0.5 payroll purchasing support person into this year's budget and then take it as a carry forward. We haven't had very good luck finding a half-time person. The market out there right now it's tough. I know we've been looking for a long-term replacement for someone going on leave, and we've gone through, what did you say today? 3 different potential employees who have grabbed other jobs before they finished our interviewing process. So we think we'd be better positioned if we can roll that up to a full-time. We can come back to the committee here with our concept for what we can restructure to fund that. So for next year, we think through alternate measures, we can meet our goal to bring on a performing arts coordinator and also fund a full-time payroll support person. And just to note, the payroll support person is a clerk level person. Our payroll manager is also our financial analyst. So the person we count on to do some support reporting, preparation of E&D, preparation of the not the annual plan, but the annual end of year report. Yeah, thank you. Also do analysis of staffing, analysis of budget. So as you can imagine with the reporting increases, he's been quite busy this year, but his first priority is to meet our payroll. So he's doing everything from high level analysis to entering spreadsheet timesheets. Purpose of the clerk would be to assist with doing some of the data entry so he can be freed up to do more of the high level work. All of our payroll is processed off-site. We would need to continue that. My understanding is if we were to go with a system that allowed for in-house check cutting, we would actually need increased staff to manage that process, just looking comparatively at other districts. That could be a conversation for another day. Looking out to work we can engage in next year, want to clarify this. We're looking at currently the middle school schedule and the high school schedule are similar to each other in that they're rotating drop schedules, but they are not aligned with each other, meaning middle school is a 6-day rotating drop, high school is a 7-day rotating drop, and they have lunches which offset in locked blocks, which are at different points in times of the day. That's why we can borrow someone here and there. You can't work between 2 buildings because you're on a different day and different time configuration, depending on where you're assigned. So it's very difficult to create a full 5-class schedule on 2 rotating schedules that are misaligned by time and day. The new high school principal and the middle school principal will need to work together with their staff to review and find a way forward to align the times in the schedule. We can think of lots of positives. I don't know what all of the implications are. So that will be a fall study, and we can get a report out from them on the potential of what that might look like. Our hope is that we can get it to a point where we could do similarly to what we've been able to do at the elementary school, seeing as we have them running on similar schedules and now joint schedules, which is more shared staff. So you can go with the one librarian, the one art teacher, perhaps the one tech teacher, things of that nature. So until we align the schedule, we won't know where we'll be able to share or what the potential outcome of that will be. Also for study and review, and this is where I think my comment earlier in my report about having so many new so much new leadership staff next year, this was designed with more stability in mind. So how much we're going to be able to accomplish, I don't know. I think we'll keep our ambitious agenda and see if we can work through it. But all of these issues, much like the position we're in this year, which make perfect sense to us, and we kind of know where a lot of the angles are, where some of the historic issues are, people are going to be learning this brand new. But we're looking at an elementary language study. It should be done as part of the review cycle. So we have a cycle of review for each of the curriculum content areas. When foreign language comes up, and I believe it's up next year, the intent is to look critically at how we've been offering elementary foreign language and see if there is a better way of doing it or a different way of doing it to return programming, but in a different or more high valued way. I think it was a program that was very enjoyable for students that people really liked, but in terms of the K-12 continuum and whether or not it truly was leading to some measurable benefit, we just didn't have the data or the structure to produce information on that. So I think that's the intent going forward. And then we want to look at reinstating the district health and wellness team. That was also on my wish list for this year. Time is not allowing for it, and we still haven't gotten the revised curriculum from the state. So we may be better served waiting and launching that at the beginning of the year. And then the library structure and program task force. I think that's an interesting one. I think there's a lot of different feelings about library. People want it back as it was. People want something completely different. People want a learning commons or a student commons similar to a college level. So the best prescription I can come up with is get people together and talk about what it could be and redesign it before we just start adding things back. And I think I spoke at a meeting recently. One of the reasons it was reduced was because when we started to look at efficiencies that we can make, having someone fully staffed in the library when students weren't really accessing the library and they weren't really having daily contact with students, it started to be a place where we could give. And we at first migrated that person into a reading support role, and then eventually we let it go. Then there was a retirement. So that's kind of the long term of, if we were at one point we were talking about all of these things coming back. We can't bring all of these things back next year in any organized or thought out way. So I think if we can manage the budget, know what our goals are for gap management, we can still continue to look at our potential enrollment opportunities to reduce or move people from one location to another as a way of funding some of these programs. For example, we may have an opportunity to make an FTE enrollment reduction at the secondary level that could become a health teacher at the elementary level. So I think those are some of the things we would look at going forward, which is why I would caution and not recommend ever just wholesale building a model of instruction and programming for students to a bottom line. I think you need first your philosophy and your intended outcome, which we have, which we've articulated in our program of studies, in our strategic plan, and build toward that and try to do so in the most efficient way possible. So that's the story. Reinstate and stabilize is the recommendation.
Okay. Okay. So taking this in a measured and somewhat organized fashion, I'm going to invite any clarifying questions, recognizing that the task before us tonight, we have a recommendation from the superintendent. We also have a comparable level services baseline. Are there any clarifying questions based on what she just presented to us that we need to have before we entertain a motion, and then we can have discussion within the motion process. Clarifying questions only, yes.
Pam, you said the gap for FY 25 and 26 is 200 and then 400K.
Roughly.
What's that?
Roughly.
Okay. You didn't provide an updated 3-year forecast in the packet, but is that $200,000 and $400,000 what in the previous versions of the 3-year model? Is that under the budget reduction line, or is that in the to get to the 3.5% line?
So after your question, we sat and had conversations with everybody to make sure we were all interpreting it correctly. There was a theory rolling at some point that there would be an additional inflow of money from towns to cover the 4% to 3.5% assessment. That's not the case. So we own the 200, and I think is it 440, 450? We own that yellow band. Or
This is the old version.
Yep.
Yep.
The orange band.
The orange band.
Orange
From
band, sorry.
Spending level to down to 3.5%.
And then what was the grade band up top for the budget reduction? We still own that 140 or 120 and 250. That's still built into the assumption?
Yeah, and with the only caveat that the top line numbers are really, it's
Rough.
very difficult to project. But I think we do tend to know that the school committee orange band line is kind of standard when you have spending that has been below 4%, but around 4%, that number, getting to 3.5% is likely something we would need to deal with.
So
That's
can we
the
just
area
be
of
crystal clear?
Yeah.
Because now I'm confused again. The gap we are seeking to solve for each year from wherever we are, presuming it's 4% to get to 3.5% is roughly 200 and 400K in each, in 25 and in 26.
Correct.
But that's after we've accounted for the budget reductions on the top part of that chart of 120 and 250.
That assumes we get to a 4% spending level.
Okay,
If at a 4% spending level, that's the gap that Pam's talking about.
okay, thank you.
And to be super clear on that, knowing that you guys know this inside and out, and you've been doing this for all these years, and just to I know you said this, but to be very clear, you're comfortable, as long as you know what that target is, that through the management, you're capable of meeting that, because we will then have a responsibility to the towns to not
Yeah.
come in a penny over 3.5.
Yeah, and I think to Jake's question, I think one thing that I just want to remind people about, there's so many statistics that fly around during budget seasons, budget booklets, et cetera. But if you just look at the past 5-year average of the 3.15% assessment level, even with all of the stress that the rising gap has caused, Jake, we've been at a 3.15% average assessment.
Yeah.
So to hit 3.5% consistently, even though we're talking about some of these deficits might occur, that will be much better situation than we've been on average, significantly so. So I share Pam's feeling that this is something we definitely can manage to, especially given where we're at over the past couple of years with enrollment, et cetera.
Any other clarifying questions? Yes, Anna?
So if I have questions about some numbers in the tables, is it now or is it in the comments section?
So
We're
let,
discussing it.
in the discussion, so is it questions about the correctness of that? So what, give us an example and then we'll place it in the right bucket.
Yeah, so in the page that when you talk about 2000, that you just mentioned about 2024, you're gonna align the middle school, high school schedule, that page. That you mentioned that in FY 23, that we are incorporating 25 payroll person and then one performing arts coordinator
Yep,
into current year.
we're going to try to.
Yeah,
Yep.
so the question is, because the 0.5 payroll person as of last week was in the FY 24 reinstatement column. So now you're saying that we can actually move that into the existing FY 23. So my question is, how is that changing? Because I was looking at the FTE in the budget table.
Yep.
The FTE didn't change for 2023. That there was no additional 0.5 in the business office role.
I believe it's in the,
We pulled that number down, I believe, for the current year, and it's up for 3.4 in the out year. So I'd have to look at the 23 number, but I do know that there's a 0.4 in there for fiscal 24.
The point,
Not the 0.4, but the 0.5.
the additional 0.5 isn't, but we carried 0.5 into the beginning of this year with the assumption we were going to be able to hire a half-time payroll person. Not being successful, in theory, we have half a year's salary sitting
Built
there.
up. Okay.
So we could now hire at the half year a 1.0 and still be budget neutral.
That makes sense. Okay.
And I believe the 0.5 is carried in the 4.6 business office headcount. Is
But
that
the
accurate?
4.6 business headcount was still 4.6 before you make this move.
We haven't done this yet. This is a proposal of what we're going to try to do this year. So if we actually go through and execute the roll-up of 0.5 to 1.0 for the second half of the year, when he does his budget to actuals again, it will show an increase in half a head for the business office.
Okay, so it just needs to be updated.
Yeah,
So
because
that-
we're not doing it yet. We're proposing that under this scenario, if we go forward tonight with a budget, that we're gonna look and see if we can make it happen this year. We think we can. We think we have a funding path. So typically, if you were here for any of the restructuring conversation last year, we'll come and say, we have a budget neutral way of going forward with this. Our intent's to bring it up to 1.0. Here's the funding mechanism. Any concerns?
For 2024, that we are increasing 2 FTEs for the TAs.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to understand is how the budget narratives changed from 2 weeks ago to like right now. Because I think before we're talking about 4 reduction in FTE with 3 retiring and 1 in the negotiation unallocated.
Yep.
So how has that 4 FTE reduction applied to this now? Because right now it's the same with the 2 additional FTE. So how is that movement looking like?
I don't know if this is gonna answer your question. When we talk about FTE, we don't cross buckets. So there's teacher assistant FTE, which is totally one category. Then there's teaching FTE, which is another category and has
Teaching assistant.
subcategories. What did I say? Teaching and teaching.
Sorry.
Teaching assistants and teachers, we would never lump those FTE together. We would hold them separate because they're separate salary structures and they're separate working agreement requirements, separate, like TAs are at-will employees and they're renewed annually. The teachers are bound by a contract. Long story short, we did not have we reduced or planning to reduce 4 general education teachers for our current head count of this year. 2 in special education, 1 high school teacher and 1 elementary teacher. As retirements come through, we'll be able to clarify exactly where those are. Additionally, we had to move 1 person off of a grant. The ESSER grant funding is starting to run out. That person has been moved into the grant. So that's where I think, Anna, you're coming up rightly with your 3.1 net FTE reduction. The TAs, are we not showing
I
a
think she's
TA?
talking about the Gordon.
Yes.
She's
Yeah,
talking
so,
about
so getting to that, so that I would separate out the teacher
Yes.
count TAs into 1 bucket.
Yes.
The TA head count, are we not accurately representing the additional 2 TAs on?
No,
the-
we added
He's
them into the
wondering
scenarios.
why we are adding 2 TAs
It's in the
when we
information.
were previously talking about losing 4 FTE
Yeah.
teachers.
So it's not a,
Well,
go ahead, you want to answer?
Is that the question
Yes.
you're asking, Anna?
Yeah, what's new in
Is
the
it the
past week?
why do we need them, or how are we representing them in the budget?
I think what I'm wondering is how the story has, and then how
Yeah.
the narratives
Yep.
have changed.
What happened?
180.
Yep.
So that was the question I had answered
Yeah.
before. So
Yeah.
typically, we fund 4 fellows from Endicott College, and Endicott College has informed us they don't have a pipeline to provide us with the number of fellows that we
So
have.
those are not included in the previous budget assumption.
Correct. They're included in contract services.
So, yeah, so just to
So
remind you guys, some things
because
that come
we-
through vouchers.
Yeah, we see
Yeah,
that.
we have fellows that we've put through vouchers for several years now, and they come from Endicott, and they are in the place of teaching assistants, not teachers. We use them in the place of teaching assistants. So a teaching assistant might cost, say, $30,000, a fellow might cost $18,000. So it's, as Pam's saying, it's a very different bucket from the teacher reductions. This is about whether we are going to get our expectations of teaching fellows who, because they're not teachers, they're still fellows in graduate school. we use them in the place of teaching assistants, not in the place of teachers.
So you're moving them from the consultant to the FTE, to the employee line. So if that's the case, shouldn't we also have a negative 28,000, negative, whatever
And I
the
guess-
TA cost is?
yeah, I was
That
I was
and the
unclear.
consultant.
We haven't done that yet because we are currently carrying 4 fellows in the contract service line. So our hope is to still get 2 fellows through contract service while adding 2 direct TAs to the budget. If we're unable to get 2 fellows through contract service, we will then need to make a transfer from contract service to the TA line to fund 2 additional TAs for a total of 4.
Yes.
I think
Go ahead, Erica.
maybe- I think maybe are you asking that, so since we have previously, prior to the program ending, we have contracted for the 4. So when we decided to move 2 to permanent TAs, the 2 special ed permanent TAs, did we then reduce the budget for the contract?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, and I hear what you're saying, that we might, we're not exactly sure what to do, but right now it's almost double counting, right? Is that what your point is?
That's it.
You could reduce it, just as a reminder, the reason, we increased that budget for other reasons, because that budget covers a lot of contracted services, included related services professionals. And so when we got that request, it also includes an increased need for anybody who's paid on a contract for speech, OT, physical therapy, audiology services. We've seen those needs increase. We also have seen in the current year that those costs have been increasing for some of those placements. So at this point, I think it's a little preliminary to reduce it entirely. You're right, and if it was a simple transition, you could just say down on, up another. The total dollar numbers would not be the same because one costs 30,
Twice as much.
the other one costs 18. But to your point, you could have a future reduction
Yep.
potentially in the contracted services line. You could. I think it might be a little preliminary to do that based on how we've seen that line materialize in the current year. In the current year, we've done some transfers in to that operation, that line, and we've also seen that we had an increased allocation in year 2 based on need.
And to simplify it, just on a making things run level, what you have still held in the contract service is the amount of money you'll need to transfer out if you need to add them in 2 direct TAs. Otherwise, it's going to be a direct after budget add, after the budget's adopted, add, and we can't go up. So something else will have to go down. So we have a mechanism for managing whether or not we get fellows or whether or not we need to move them into the TA line. We can always do a after budget reduction or a budget to actual change.
The other
Because
thing,
we could, I mean, I think the TA thing is important because we may have more TA ads before the end of the year, just based on end of year reevaluations of students. This number is never solid.
TA numbers do change mid-year. At the most recent transfer that we did for 23, we're at $290,000 for operational expenses and contracted services in this area, based on some of those contract services supports that we've been talking about through the vouchers, and we've asked about a couple of meetings. So right now, the 24 budget is $18,000 above 23 where we're running to today. So it's pretty tight. Yes, we could reduce it. I understand your question. Given that it's only $18,000 above, and we've seen the cost this year go from initially 260 budget up to 290. I'm not sure I would reduce it just yet, but that is potentially a reduction. We could parking lot for future reduction if either this year ends better than 291, or if we start to see things that are changing in next year as we go through the year. Either way, every year, teaching assistants is something that we do see changes during the year. It does change frequently during the year, just like placements for students in district and out of district change during the year. So too do teaching assistants, who are typically assigned on a one-to-one basis for students, and it's part of our way to make sure that they can be successful in the classroom. So sometimes those needs will change mid-year. We'll typically do adjustments and updates for school committee, but between the contracted services and the TA lines, they are more likely to change throughout the year than other budget lines.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other clarifying questions based on what was presented? Okay, knowing that we've asked a lot of questions along the way, so that is a good thing. Okay, so for process wise, then I would like to entertain a motion. I'd like to see if there's a motion on the table and a second, and then we can move through some discussion. Pam and Avi, thank you for your continued work on behalf of making this clear and understandable for us so that we can even come up with, you know, the things that we want to know about and discuss further. So we really appreciate that. Is there a motion at this time?
Yeah, for the purposes of discussion, I move that the Manchester Essex Regional School Committee adapt the reinstate and stabilize budget as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chris. Okay, so discussion. Now we're in the discussion. Now we talk about this. So I will start us off by saying part of what we've been doing as a committee is really working through not just what is before us, but also how the towns are going to manage it. And that is important work. And we've had a lot of opportunity to work through that and come to understand some of it. But a lot of that also is going to be, while we take it into account in our creating our opinions, that's going to have to be their work to do at a point. So my hope is that we can take some of these things at face value and take a look at what we feel is appropriate and how we feel about Pam's recommendation to us on its face, knowing that we are already considering what has been brought forth to us. So does anyone have any discussion about this reinstate and stabilize, which includes 3 changes to the level of services budget presented? Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
I actually would recommend that we vote for the local services. The reasons are the $30 million budget, 88% is funded by the taxpayers. So we do have fiduciary duty, responsibility to make sure that we don't just approve what is putting forward in front of us, but really understand what's in it. Because it's not just impacting the data or the numbers, it's impacting the programs. But for me to advocate for or recommend to vote for the level services, it's not because I do not want to instate any program services. The opposite, I actually want more programs. I have 3 kids in the system, probably more so than anybody in the room. But what I would like is to be responsible, financially responsible. I would like to understand more and to make sure that we actually reinstate the right program. I feel like we haven't had a chance as a committee to really go through the priority list, to really decide together what are the priorities. Are the late bus, the 6th grade Spanish, and whatever other else is really the top 3. I cannot answer that right now. And it's not because I don't want, the 6th grade Spanish to be added in. I wanted it. I want to ask, Chinese. I want everything else too. But I don't feel like we are ready for this as a committee to actually make that decision, because to make an informed decision, I don't have the tool yet. And I actually recommend that, to your point, Amy, about what are we fighting for? I don't know. Yeah. So I actually don't know if this top 3 are what we're fighting for. That's why I feel like we need more time to make the right decision. And for us to have more time right now to vote for the reinstatement of the 3 things, I personally don't feel comfortable. My second point is, out of the $30 million, 63% is the salary. I personally don't feel like we as a committee, or at least myself, and I actually I can guarantee you that I spend the most time looking at the numbers in and out from different angles. I personally actually don't understand the FTEs thoroughly, comprehensively, about how it relates to enrollment, how it relates to special ed, non-special ed, general ed, how it relates to class size. We don't have the data yet, and having the data is such a strong tool for us to make strategic, programmatic decisions. And I just feel like we're not there yet. And salary, well, our budget, 60% is salary. I would actually recommend, if to instate anything at all, it should use some of the money to do a salary benchmarking analysis to make sure that we are paying our staff, fairly, equitably, and competitively. Instead of applying a 4% increase for the non-union across the board, there might be some areas that might need more, some areas might need less. We don't know, and I don't know. Personally, I don't know. So I feel like for me to make that decision, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay.
I also feel like we don't have enough, financial reporting and monitoring processes in place. The budget process, I also feel like we probably could improve, but that is for future years. And I do think that the finance subcommittee, we should probably do better to improve a lot of different things, to make sure that we provide recommendation to the committee that we all feel comfortable. At least I would feel comfortable to make the decision. The multi-year, like Jake brought up, I don't feel comfortable with that either, because the multi-year right now is assuming the enrollment is based on the same FY22 enrollment. We know that's not true because enrollment will drop every year, just based on what we know. So having that projection, even though we're building at a very high level analysis right now, I do feel like there are room for refinement.
Okay.
And as a CFO, as a member of the finance subcommittee, I cannot consciously actually say that I recommend the reinstatement, because what I feel comfortable is business as usual at the level services, because I do feel like there's more work that we need to do.
Okay. So I just want to make one clarification, my request, so I appreciate that, and I recognize and I know how much effort and time you've put into coming to understand these things and really looking at things with a different lens, which I very much appreciate. I just want to be clear when we're offering our things that we keep it in the context of though, because I don't think it's fair to say that the committee hasn't had enough experience or information. I know that those of us, or I will speak for myself, I won't speak for anybody else. I do feel like I have the information that I need. What I need right now is to discuss and see how we're feeling. I'll use an example of the middle school world language, that to me was a really good example. I was on the committee when we took lots and lots of public comment, and at Manchester Town Meeting, people were very much against that, the cut of the elementary, but this is a good example of putting back only what makes sense. So to me, for instance, that is a responsible ask, because it keeps our middle school in alignment with what other middle schools in the area offer. It keeps our program going, but it also says, no, we're not just going to put back the K-6 whole thing just because everybody was upset about it. If we're going to do that, we need time to look at it more clearly. So I think that the things you're looking for are happening, and I myself do feel that I have the information before us, but it's perfectly reasonable to have a different take on it. So thank you.
I feel as though coming from a multi-year standpoint also, Anna, it's important to recognize that this isn't business as usual, that level services today represents every cut that has been made in the past, right? So at some point, that wasn't business as usual. Having sat in on negotiations, having looked at the teacher contract, having looked at our comparable districts, I feel comfortable saying that I think that our teachers are paid well. I think that our teachers are not overpaid at the same time. And I know that after we finish our teacher contract, we're going to be moving to our TA contract. And I know that we're going to be looking at how fairly they're compensated as well. I think that our decision tonight needs to, I think that we have to make these tough choices. I don't think that it's okay. I am not comfortable saying that we have to stick with business as usual because of the information that's available to us. I feel like I have the information that I need to make hard choices. And Sebastian is going to be on that late bus every day next year. Annie, you can.
Do we want to talk about each one of these and their merits and how, like, what we think is valuable about them, and do this a little bit more strategically in the moment?
Maybe we should just go around and say how we're feeling about it.
About the whole thing generally?
Yeah.
Okay, start there. So go ahead. We've heard Anna.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I appreciate Anna's perspective as another new person. I share many of the thoughts in terms I don't have historical perspective. That said, I come to a different conclusion. I'm looking at two different budgets, which have exactly $100,000 between them. That as a percentage of a $30 million budget is not a huge amount. And for that amount, we are able to do, and I'll highlight the one thing that I think is most important to me. We're able to restore a foreign language program at our middle school. This is important. This is something people really showed up and cared about. I know that this is hard on the towns. I know that Essex is facing a particularly challenging situation, but given the dollar amounts we're talking about, I think we really have to focus on the students. And the students deserve this. The students deserve to have this cut restored. And I would actually say, Pam, I would hope we could actually move up the consideration of how to better structure the programmatic issues surrounding the elementary school. I hear you. I said when I ran for this position, I am not an educator. I don't know how best to do these things, but I do know that we should be striving to be a district that can do these things. And I don't want to be punting it down the road because I think we can. The late bus, you know, I'm on the fence, but I will take Kate's advice that this is important. And I also appreciate your advice that there's an equity issue and that we are trying to draw on different opportunities in the two towns. So for me, when we look at the total dollar amount at issue, I think we should be voting for the school. And I don't think that means that we don't continue to consider what other things we should be doing and if we should have other language programs, if we should be looking at other things. But for today, that's where I come out.
Thank you, Erica. We're just going right around. Jake?
All right, so first of all, I definitely appreciate the town's support for and recognition that we've been using reserves and to do this correction. For those of you who have been part of that collaboration discussion, I know that's been long and I appreciate that. And Pam and Avi for sticking with us as we learn the process and the ropes and all the questions here. For me, to Erica's point, you know, the difference here is not big. However, if the towns are helping with the fields in a way that we are not drawing our reserves, it seems like our reserves then are in a healthy enough position that $50,000 should not be a big draw from that. And that's half of the reinstatement. The other two, I completely hear the need for them. You know, I think there is a point to Annie, your comments about, you know, messaging and adding back, you know, might complicate the sell a little bit. But, you know, it's a small amount. Those are not, the late bus and the middle school are important and they're not a hill that I'm gonna die on. To me, the bigger issue here is that passing this budget is as much about the next 3 to 5 years as it is about this year. And it really worries me that we are going to add something back in this year and next year or the year after be in a position to have to cut again. We're looking at, and Pam and Avi tell me if I'm stating this wrong, but we're looking at a total gap of $300,000 in FY25 around, right? Between the budget correction to get to 4% and the gap to get to 3.5%. And then almost 700,000 in FY26, and that escalates up to almost $1 million in FY27. If I'm reading these right, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Adding that you're assuming you're adding the number to the gap to get down to 4%. I get it.
Yeah. Those are efficiencies and or changes we're gonna have to make in the next 3 years. Those are not small numbers. And everything we add to this budget this year makes that harder going forward. And, you know, change takes time, right? We have to start planning for this. If we get in a position a year, 2, 3, 4 years from now, however long it is, and we haven't planned for changes, then the only option we have are cuts. So we need to be strategic. We need to plan for changes that are at a scale of $1 million a year. So it really worries me to add things back in this year.
Thank you. I will reserve my, no, I will go. We're just going around the table. So I'll put my cards on the table. I worry when we say exactly what Pam used as an example about, for instance, the $50,000 in small capital. Well, we're going to have a healthy reserve. We'll just pull from that. That's exactly the kind of conversation that got us where we are. When we pull from reserve, we're in it, right? And I recognize that that's not, anyway, I have trouble with that in my headspace here because that's exactly what we're trying to get away from right now. So I would not choose to engage moving forward. Whether or not we do that, I think is discussion. I would rather we have the discussion about it, take a stand on it one way or the other, and make a decision, and then go from there, but not just say, well, we're going to do this because we know you'll just pull from reserves from it. Regarding the world language, like I said before, I heard enough about this. I know this is something people care about. I do think that it makes sense. It is a smaller ask than it would have been. It is a smaller reinstatement than a cut, which I think is responsible. I really, really appreciate the forward thinking about looking at aligning the two bell schedules, because that is an efficiency. And that's what Jody was referring to, by the way, that I said wouldn't take place immediately. I think that that's the kind of efficiency that isn't going to impact our program, but is going to offer us opportunities. And so this is a smaller bring back than it was a cut. And I think that's very responsible. I am interested, it sounds silly, it is the smallest thing on here, but I would love to debate the late bus. I really would. But I am in favor of recognizing this number and looking that the number for Essex, for whom this is the biggest issue, is a total of about $40,000, a little bit less, that's the number. A couple years back when we started, no, not when we started, but no, when we started this message, it was all over. We spent months arguing about $38,000. And in the end, it was $38,000. And we all looked back and said, did we really need to argue about $38,000? So I am in favor of this for that reason. I do trust, and this is something that I can feel comfortable with because I've watched it happen for 3 years now, 2 on the committee and 1 the year before. When they say we can manage this down to 3.5, I understand why that would be concerning. And I've seen it happen. So I don't have the same level of concern. I agree that we need to be talking and working through, okay, what happens after that? But I don't think it needs to hold my vote up tonight on that. But I do appreciate the outlook on it. So that's my feeling so far. Go ahead, Kate.
I want to start out by saying how grateful I am for the work that everybody has done just to get to these 2 columns, right? Remember when we started with 4 columns and people's heads were exploding because of how different they were, and some people wanted this one and some people wanted this one. And I think that for people who are just tuning in because this is our last budget meeting, they've missed a lot of the process to get here and a lot of the work to whittle it down to this, these 2 options. In terms of the late bus and to what Jake is saying, I feel like the possibilities for benefiting from the late bus are huge, especially now that we're expanding elementary school options. As a parent who drives back and forth to Manchester endlessly, this would, I know, improve the parental logistics on my part, but I think that the same can be said for lots and lots of families in Essex, especially families who are unable to access some of the enriching activities that are happening over here. But to Jake's point, I think that the late bus is an easy enough add to say, all right, it's only $20,000 and that's going to be split between the 2 towns. And if it's a flop, it's $20,000 that's going, that I don't think it's a huge gamble. And Sebastian's gonna be on that bus every day. In terms of world language, I look at us as one of the most competitive school districts in our region, and all of the most competitive school districts offer middle school foreign language. The age that students or the grade that students matriculate to middle school varies. And it just happens that sixth grade can fall under an elementary teaching license, but for the purposes of the structure of our school district, sixth graders are in our middle school and they should be getting foreign language. In Beverly, where middle school starts, in fifth grade, they're getting foreign language. It's a structural, I think it varies depending on how you structure your schools. However, it's common for middle schoolers to take foreign language. And again, to Jake's point, because of the continuity of this, if we had to cut it, and I hope that we don't, because I think that in order to stay competitive and relevant, we have to be offering foreign language to middle schoolers. If we had to, we're not interrupting that continuity, right? It's not like we added elementary school, I'm sorry, Matt. It's not like we added elementary school foreign language back and now kids have had it K1, 2 and are losing it 3, 4, 5, right? You're getting it in sixth grade. This year is getting it in sixth grade, and we know that they're going to get it seventh, eighth, ninth because that's not on the block. If you lose that sixth grade, you're losing 1 year of kids who aren't getting it in sixth grade. You're not having kids who are getting it 4 or 5, not getting it in 6. I think that it makes sense from a continuity standpoint. And then to me, the small cap line is a no-brainer. I trust Avi and I trust Pam to look at our facilities and to make decisions about maintaining them that are fiscally responsible. And I think that for a lot of us, it needs to come back to listening to the people who have done this for a very long time. But asking smart questions and making hard choices, done passing the talking stick.
You stole my last line. That was my opening line.
Done?
No, that was my opening. No, so, I mean, in terms of the incomplete information, unless I'm like Pam or Avi's intern and thought like, it just, I'd have to spend 50, 60 hours a week to have the level of information, to have the level of nuance, to have the level of detail. Like, I need to accept that. I think back to our COVID days when it was, I mean, I was tasked with, hey, when are we shutting down the school for 6 to 8 months? Like, and I'm not an infectious disease expert. I'm not I worked in a school at the time, so I was making the same decisions as well. But it's like, I had to listen to the community. I had to listen to the school leaders. I had to do my own research. I had to read what was presented to me. And then I had to make a decision with wildly incomplete, a lot of us did. And we had to shut down a school and then we had to bring it back in hybrid and then we had to bring it back. So that's my opening thing, is that like, I'm never going to feel like I have 100% certainty that I know every single detail to make an informed decision. I need to be okay with that. And for me to add on top of that, like, I don't have kids yet in this community. So I need to listen to others who do, but I don't have the day-to-day. I'm not in an elementary school every single day. So I have to have some trust in the committee, the leaders who are presenting this information, that they are living, breathing this thing, and they're sharing their best thoughts with me. And then I have to ask probing questions and kind of go from there. So that's my kind of opening one. And in terms of like, obviously the meat and potatoes, so that's kind of like in terms of the columns, these priorities, like I do need to place some trust in this. The one thing I can't speak confidently about is the small cap line, because if you fall behind that from a facilities perspective, you're playing catch up the whole time, because kids break stuff all of the time. They do. I mean, and TikTok will have a new challenge, and you have to renovate half your bathrooms. So,
That's a really good.
I don't even want to get into that. So I have to take some trust there. My biggest concern last year with budget season was that we were gonna make cuts. That was gonna be the new normal, and it wasn't the new normal, and it shouldn't be. So like, to me, the stabilized is the normal. It's not. Level services to me is like, let's solidify those cuts. So let's keep those permanent. And that to me was something I didn't want to do last year. I tried to dip into the capital reserve to not do that because I didn't want to set this expectation that this is now the new normal. So I'm much obviously more in the reinstate column.
Thank you, Matt. Chris.
I'm pretty much good. I don't really think much has been, is in my head that hasn't already been said, so.
Okay, is there anything we feel like we need to discuss? Are we ready to move a vote? I have a clarifying question based on the conversation. Because again, I know it is the smallest gamble, but about the late bus, what is the basis for evaluation? Like Kate said, you know, if we started in and then it flops.
If Sebastian's on it,
It's whether or not Sebastian is indeed
For the
on the
record,
bus.
I am kidding.
Why don't I offer we take the late bus off? We'll run it as a pilot next year and reintroduce it as a formal part of the budget. If it's successful.
Come again.
I feel like there's,
What do you mean as
The
a
night-
pilot? How, what are we?
we'll
what are we
take
saying
head
here?
counts, we'll measure usage, we will look at what programs can be supported.
But
through
how
it.
are we going to fund it if it's not in the budget for next year?
Get creative.
Chris, speak to that further.
I think that
And
as, you know, as we're doing with other aspects of this budget, I think it's very simple if, I think you can, I think we should add it in. It's something that we talk about when we talk about equality between the schools. I think, you know, as long as it's just simply publicized, that it will be used. And as you mentioned, there's great ways to do that. If it's not, then that's an area that we can then comfortably cut for the next year's budget. So there's two ways to look at it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We're already asking for money this year. This is a very, very small percentage of that. We are already asking for a correction, as you mentioned, Matt. This isn't really, the level services column here, it isn't level services. The mean state and stabilizes level services from 2 years ago. So, you know, if there's no data, if it was truly useless or not being utilized, I trust in the administration that they would have already known that. You are recommending it, so I trust in that.
I think I think it's worth saying that what's changed since the original conversations about the buses, it was a straight, how many kids do we have on the bus? I think now we'd be asking, who does the bus serve? And what does it give them access to that they may not otherwise have access to if the bus doesn't exist? So you may not have 30 kids on the bus, but you may have 6 kids on the bus who couldn't otherwise have after-school care, participate in the play, or play sports if that bus didn't exist. So I ask you to weigh the $20,000 in that way. And certainly, if it is getting no usage and serves no purpose, we're not going to hold on to it.
And I think that was a good point, though, because we do have that gap coming for the next year that you're going to be managing down to, and certainly you'll be needing to look closely at those things. So I'm only asking it because Annie
And
won't ever stop
it's a fair
talking about it.
question.
No,
It's a fair question.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Well,
I don't look at my phone during my meeting unless you're my daughter.
I mean, what is it, a point?
So a couple of other things to
0.1%
consider.
or
Tonight,
something? 0.02%?
I won't,
Yeah.
if I'm speaking out of turn.
Can we try to see how we get there with us first? All right. I heard you saying something. I saw your hand and I see yours. So can we go Anna, Kate, Jake?
So at the end of the day, $20,000 is peanuts. So the reason why I made my statement earlier is not about the 20,000, not about the 50,000, it's the principle of it. For example, just last school committee or the 2 school committee meetings before, it was presented at FY '23 this year. We're gonna be under budget $290,000. We are budgeting on budget, so the $290,000 savings is not reflected here or there. So when we're talking about cutting 20,000, 50,000, all that stuff, we could very well be using the savings that we have this year to fund some of those things. That's why I go back to what I said earlier is we need to have more accurate, refined financial data for us to make really the priorities and decisions instead of keep adding things back in. It's kind of like adding things on top of the padding that we already have. To me, that doesn't make sense.
I hear that you see it that way. I do see it differently, but I can appreciate why you see it that way. Thank you. Kate and then Jake.
I was just going to add on to the value of the late bus in terms of, I think that once we are running it, even if it is 6 kids who are accessing programs that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access, that then we can leverage it to give bonuses to a far greater population, right? That once it's running and we have justified that it is providing a service to kids who wouldn't have that service, we then can broaden the use of it, and we can then be looking at sports practices for elementary school kids. I mean, once it's running, we have so many more possibilities. Anyway, that's.
Jake?
I think I have more of a clarification question, just so that I understand the process related to our vote today. Whether or not the late bus is going to be used, whether or not we need the small cap line or can draw from reserves. We have the potential to reduce our budget going forward. The notion that, we can take that 50,000 small cap out of reserves, we could potentially do that, assuming the fields are supported by a town bond or whatever that process is. If that fails, however, we have to take that out of our reserves, right? So, at what point, and maybe it's any point, can we reduce the budget? In other words, assuming that we keep the $50,000 small cap line there on the contingency that the fields don't pass a town vote, we would absolutely need that $50,000. Can we still make a decision to, assuming the fields pass, we could still then make a decision to pull 50,000 out of our own reserves for this kind of work? Is that accurate to say?
So it's a philosophical question of how you stand on that. All I would tell you is what we use that line, which is small capital, is for really recurring needs on individual items that are small. So I would say in a given year, the fact that we could have, if we increase this to $100,000 of smaller needs that aggregate to $100,000, I have no doubt. There are constant items here that might be $5,000 to $12,000 that add up building by building over time. And we know that there are going to be more of those with Essex. They are not for the larger projects. So for example, a boiler replacement, that would be kind of really one time and much bigger, a single item. That's something that I think is more suited towards a reserve usage. What we're proposing, where we were when we did the fiscal 16 correction to what that we're trying to reinstate now, is to have adequate funding for annual projects that are smaller in need. So just to give you a couple examples, if you looked at the vouchers, we talked about replacing, I think it was 20% of the steam traps at Essex Elementary. You may remember about 4 or 5 years ago, we used grant funding to redo all of them. That was great, a big success. I was like, oh, we're already replacing them? Well, yeah, it's because we have an old building with steam trap technology that isn't put into any new building. So this would allow us to continue to put aside funding for that. Another small example, we have several original to the building air conditioning units in IT closets. It's like the smallest thing I would never bug you guys with. It might cost $10,000 to replace one. But every year you might do one or two. So that's, you can quickly get to the current allocation, no problem on these little onesies and twosies. So this is about, short answer, recurring funding, whereas I think the reserves, even though we're getting major help from the towns, I don't want to overlook that, it's amazing. That's really for big ticket items that I think should be high 5 figures, 6 figures or over. We're going to be talking about a boiler project, turf fields, we found out alternative funding, any types of things like that. So this is for smaller items that are recurring. I wouldn't recommend using one for the other. One's recurring, one's one time. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up.
Yeah.
But that also goes back to how we want to manage our reserves. Because if both towns are paying or not wanting us to use our reserve to fund the fields, our reserves is gonna be 10, 11%, which to some standard, it might be too high. So we gotta think about, yes, totally agree, the reserve is for emergency purpose, but at the same time, we could also be very strategically using our reserve to fund the small things. instead of building it into the budget, or maybe just to draw down the reserve every year strategically for a specific purpose.
So can I support that? Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead. Did you want, I just want to support that comment to say that part of the reserve strategy, now that we're getting to a level where we're trying to not use them for operating, we have a turf field replacement plan. And we've talked about at some of our subcommittee meetings, what that target is, and it's really not a new number to say that 10% is a goal. To Anna's point, if that number goes above that, I do think that that's where you start to talk about how can you use that strategically. The goal is not to build reserves ad infinitum at all. It's to have a stable level of reserves that are predictable. Right now, 10% is the commonly discussed target. That's what the policy that we're working on will set. And I think Anna's right. We might be able to work that down and say, hey, this is something we could take out of a budget, et cetera. Would I cut the budget to do that? I'm not sure. Could we fund other things strategically to avoid reserves going higher? I would totally agree with that.
And right now, recognizing also that part of the reason for this strategy is knowing that we're going out to EES, and we're going to need to make sure that our creditworthiness is strong for borrowing power and be able to manage anything in between, if a boiler or roof or whatever those
The
major
boiler
things are.
is imminent.
I know.
So there's going to be a drawdown on reserves just for our larger capital items,
Right.
which are enumerated in our capital plan.
Yeah.
Then there is on top of it, the Habib report. I mean, there's just a practical
Yeah.
nature here that we can't dismiss it and stay up in the theory, right? So the facilities cap line, that's for the facilities department. Paint, flagpoles, we've got to tar the driveway, we've got potholes. There's, there's something creaky on the playground we just put in, we got to get out there and fix it, and it's not under warranty. They need to construct a needs-based list every year that then they go attack, and that's their money to do it.
Mhm.
So this goes to how are we maintaining our buildings with regularity? Not how are we planning for a rainy day? The reserves are the rainy day, and that's a long list too. And I'm going to keep drawing us back to this building. This building has increased needs, whether it be flooring, wall discolorations. If you walk through the main lobby, we have beautiful moldings, but the moldings are starting to chip and peel. We need to be prepared for all of those things as well. Some of them, with good annual maintenance planning, will fall into our $100,000 facility line. That's really stretching that money. Others will have to get placed into the larger reserve line. So we know immediate is Essex, but this building cannot be unattended and unmaintained. Otherwise, we're going to create another long-term problem for all the parties at the table.
Okay, so I think what I'd like to do is give one final opportunity. Let's do one more go around and then move the vote. If anyone has anything to say, Jake.
So I think at this point in time, I think that the stabilize is the right move to make at this point in time, depending on how the field issue plays out. We may look at that 50,000, getting a better understanding of maintenance needs and the capital needs. Once we see the BEAD report in its final form, will help us with that as well. But for now, it makes sense to include that. So yeah, that's where I stand at the moment.
Erica?
Nothing further.
No comment?
No, I made it.
Anna?
I still stand that I recommend the level services. But again, I want to emphasize, not because I don't want to add programs. I have 3 kids
Yep.
in the school. I want the best program out there, but just out of the principle that I just feel like we're not ready to make that decision about what to add.
That's fair. Yeah, thank you. And by the way, you're here serving, so that says something about your care about the education. Go ahead, Chris. No? Matt?
I yield my time.
We're getting really official now. Where's the gavel? Kate?
I have to say that I am surprised by where this conversation has gone. I thought that I was prepared to come here tonight and to have to argue down a bunch of additional asks from, I think, representing other needs and other viewpoints about the budget. I am relieved that that's not where we have arrived after a lengthy process. I'm glad that we are finding some more common ground. The last position I thought I would be in, Anna, would be arguing with one of our Manchester members over additional spending that I wanted that you did not. But I think that this represents a financially responsible ask of our towns. I think that it represents an ask that we have mindfully pared down a lot over the last couple of weeks, and I hope that it provides some value back to our kids, right? At the end of the day, we're serving our communities, but we're a school district and our consumers are our students. I think that this does a good job of balancing the needs of the people we represent.
And mine, as I've been sitting here listening, I was really making a conscious choice tonight to engage in active listening with an open mind to all of the inputs tonight, including from public comment. And so I guess my final thought is that after hearing everything and also appreciating the inputs that we've had, I want to answer the question that I don't know if it was Jody or Annie asked at the beginning of what do I stand for? I am confident that I stand behind this recommendation that you've made. I stand behind it because what I've witnessed over the course of this budget season is a committee that didn't take this lightly. I thought at the beginning of the year that I was going to have to really help people understand why they should care about the constraints that Essex faces as an Essex representative. I thought I was going to have to really sell that in some way, and I didn't. We've got people here who truly care about that, who've engaged in the process, and I've witnessed that. Like Kate said, there's not some laundry list of asks here. Everything that we brought forth when we had that opportunity to share those things has been addressed. It doesn't necessarily mean it was addressed by a dollar value putback, but it's here's when we're going to handle this and how. I think that's responsible and smart. What I've also witnessed is further understanding about the decreases in staff due to enrollment over time, the number of roughly 1 to 20 when you finally averaged it out, and we got to see that. The schedule reconciliation, that is a forward-thinking way to manage these costs, and that makes me more confident in this recommendation as well. Looking forward, knowing that we have a plan to start utilizing those OPEB funds, which were smartly and responsibly taken care of. And not every municipality can say that they've done that. So I stand behind this when I cast my vote. And for what it's worth, I know that Essex has a lot of work ahead of us when we come to whatever this final is, and I'm in for it. And I will be out there in whatever capacity is most appropriate and in my role. I will do everything I can to help people understand why it matters, because these ask backs are two things that will directly impact students and families, and one thing that directly speaks to responsible stewardship of our facilities. And I'm all in favor of it. So there should be no question about what do I stand for at this point. I stand for responsible stewardship for a high quality education as driven by community input for the strategic plan.
With come up with that on the fly?
Every bit of it. I'm not even kidding.
That's good.
This was blank, man.
That was in the shower.
It wasn't. All right, with that, we will move the vote. The motion on the floor is to approve the recommendation given of the reinstate and stabilize budget. All in favor? All opposed? That's one opposed. The motion carries. We have a budget. We need to do it.
So I just want
A
to,
lot of good work, really.
thank you.
Public comments closed.
I just wanted, we've done this in prior years for the purpose of our minutes. The reinstate stabilized budget is a budget of $30,236,064. And if we could also have a motion, even though it seems like there was agreement to vote our capital budget, which right now stands at $4,175,000. Sorry, $4,175,020. Is there a motion to support?
Is there a motion to support the capital budget as stated?
Where am I looking to?
The very last
The
page.
very last page.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Chris Reed moves. Is there a second? Second. They're jumping to second. Any discussion? This is very standard and set, and we did discuss the only change, which was with
Happy
the,
to answer any questions.
okay. Pam, do you have a question?
Oh, no,
Or
you're
you
in the middle
voting?
of a vote. No.
All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brett,
Can I?
please go ahead.
First, Pam.
So I was gonna offer like next steps.
Yes.
Because we have a budget, but we're not done with the budget, right? So over the next month, a couple of things typically happen. Our assumptions aren't finalized. All indicators are they will improve and not decline, but we don't have anything concrete. So some things we're gonna continue to watch and work on. We know healthcare settles out by the end of the month. We had very good news in like 50% reduction. We'll hold out hope that we might be able to gain some ground there. Continuing to work with the state through our local advocacy group, meeting with legislators this month on the 14% out of district tuition hike. There could be some funding coming our way. What we have no idea is what form that funding will take. Will it come through circuit breaker? So it's targeted to tuition offsets. Will it flow in through Chapter 70? So it's a more generalized use. Will it be 5% of the 14? We have no idea. We're hopeful that there's something. So there's some potential for some increased revenue there. The other thing to watch in the long term is I've been having conversations with our regional group. There's a survey that came out yesterday about need for overrides. Of the initial 18 or 20 respondents, 50% of the districts are out looking for overrides because structural deficits exist due to the 2.5 issue. We're starting to hear indicators that our statewide platform next year may include statewide advocacy for a revamp of 2.5. It's unsustainable statewide. My message in that is we are working on an issue that cannot be solved at this table for the long term. We will continue to operate in this fashion until there's a large scale overhaul of educational funding in the state. So it's nothing we're doing wrong here. Doesn't mean we can't find creative solutions to manage our local problem, but this is a problem much bigger than ourselves and one that we find many districts in right now. Our nearest partners, Triton, Pentucket, they're all fighting it. I'll keep you updated on who else is going out for an override, but we're all working the same issues. So I think that's important to keep in the back of our minds as we're planning here and thinking that we have to find what we're doing wrong. Because I don't think we need to start with an assumption that there's something wrong locally because we work in the context of a much bigger system. So that's what I've got. So potentially some good news coming down the pike in March. We would have the opportunity to add revenue in, offset things, and lower the number to the town if it works in our favor. That happened 10 years ago. We had an after budget increase in Chapter 70, and we just factored it in and improved the numbers for everyone. So work continues.
Can I add on to your next steps? Can we add maybe to include the finance subcommittee to work with you guys, you and Avi, to have a plan for the next year or two to refine, improve our budget, financial management process with more data analysis to provide the tools for the school committee?
I think that that's something that we're putting on the summer conversation for sure to prioritize for, as we set our priorities for next year, because we're not done with this work either, but go ahead.
And we'll have to go with the will of the committee if you vote to go in that direction, but I don't think it's an appropriate time. We have too much. There are too many other burning priorities that we're going to have to address. So as soon as we close this out, we're going to move to supporting the towns with whatever the next steps are and continue to monitor this budget. For the most part, we're done with all of the production pieces of the budget for this year. We'll take up school choice. We have to open up the SOI. That's going to be incredibly time consuming for the same team that would be working on any more budget development for 25. We're going to have 3 searches, 2 concurrent, back to back with the one that just started. And then we're gonna have to be onboarding people while we're offboarding people so that we can have some continuity. And I know I'm forgetting 2 other key pieces.
Negotiations.
Negotiations. And we have negotiations. So I think attention needs to go to these priorities right now. The bandwidth of the business office is only so great. I love the idea of trying to process on what the committee wants to see differently next year so we can get a jump on it. But I would like to hold that off until June, July.
So let's put that in the summer bucket, but in the meantime, we can be paying attention, and I'm interested in learning your input on some of this because I come from a different vantage point on the finance subcommittee together. Okay, school committee comment. I have comments, so don't pack up.
Yeah.
I have a couple. Does anyone else have comment currently?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I just want to note that the changes that we just approved in the budget were the result of direct community feedback. And I think that that's an awesome example of why it's so important to tune in to the school committee and to chime in public comments, because the things that we are adding back to the budget are things that we have heard from the public about, and even that the restructuring that we've done to accommodate the performing arts coordinator as well. And so thank you to everybody who's still listening. It's probably, I don't have it open anymore. Oh, there are still
Do we have
a
people?
lot of people still
Yeah, I
on.
can't
So
see. I don't even know
thank you,
how many we
everybody
have.
that is still here, and thank you, everybody who has provided us with public comments to help guide this process, and we welcome your input.
Is that a party or is that us up on the top there?
That's us.
That's
Oh, okay.
us.
Yes. I'm
Please
I'm
tell
lost
us
myself.
Those are the people at Callas.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Great speech.
Yeah, please.
I forgot to say this when we were discussing the budget because it doesn't have a funding implication, but I thought what Lindsay said is really important about libraries and democracy and the time we're living in right now. And despite the fact that it doesn't have a budgetary implication, I'm glad to see it on here, and I'm glad to see that we're going to consider how to approach restructuring in a way that will make sure we maintain that as a central part of our school system.
It's another great example of how one person is saying one thing, but when more than one person says it and we start to get that feedback, it can help shape things. Okay, I have three things. One is, I think we covered most of the questions. I know Jody had some, but I think we covered a couple, but would you speak to the timing of certification for E&D?
So E&D has been filed for this year.
Okay.
We're just waiting on certification back.
Yeah.
We haven't received it.
Yeah, and the estimates that we have put into the reserve projections are based on what we believe the E&D will be certified at.
Okay.
And it's true that, if you remember when our auditors have presented, they have told us to put in FTE into our business office. The half-time payroll clerk is half of what they would have recommended. And, we've done some restructuring. We've helped to save some money in the process, and I think we have a better product. But as we continue to look for increased output, I just think we need to be mindful of the fact that it's not a lot of people. Case in point, we've got, one leave of absence in the business office is going to just be quite a bit of, we do have cross-training and all that, but it's going to be, quite a hiccup to manage. And so my job is to make sure the bills get paid on time. And that's a very unglamorous thing to do. I won't be paying all the bills during the leave, don't worry. But my point is, we're small. And so we have to just be mindful of that.
Thank you. To that, go ahead.
And not to belabor, but just to match it with Anna's good ideas and suggestions. And I'm looking out of the corner of my eye at Annie. We are built and staffed for how we've been doing things.
Right.
We are not built and staffed for where we want to go. So I think that has to be a consideration as we plan forward, how we scale up having the right people in the right seats to manage the outputs that may become the committee's interest in the future. It's not a right or wrong, or good or bad. It's just if we're changing, just know that some of the bandwidth isn't an individual issue. It's the way we're structured. Like if you look at Hamilton Wenham, I believe they have business manager, assistant business manager, payroll manager, and HR manager, accounts sending and receiving. So I mean, we're three people.
Yeah.
So we can either staff up and increase output, or we can find creative ways to try to do it. But we can't do everything all at once and do it well. And I think we're trying to match all of the wants, but we're not able to do everything and do it well.
Thank you. And then the second thing was, I had thought it was in my MASC stuff, but I just want to make sure everybody here, since you were talking about advocacy, recognizes that MASC sponsors a day for school committees to join at the State House. I believe it's May 4th. I could be wrong about that. I'll get the date, but it's something to be aware of and to potentially put on your calendar. I am planning to go, and I hope that as many of you as possible will join me because, as stated, this is something that lots of committees are facing, meaning all of them. And then my final comment for tonight is to thank you, Pam and Avi. We know it's not done, and we know that this is a transition. Erica and I had this conversation that this is a transition time from how we were doing things to how we're doing things moving forward. And it's been a lot to get to this point, and we've already thanked everyone, all the inputters and the people at the table, but I just want to publicly thank you guys and also thank the administrators, the principals who work through their building budgets and who shave each year in order to do that, who work with their school councils when appropriate and who work with their staff to really identify what they can do. I think that we don't give enough credit to the school principals and the curriculum director in thanks for them, and thanks to Jason also for continuing to run a lean operation. So show of gratitude for all.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just want to add on to that, even though I'm probably the most nitpicking on the numbers, but I do appreciate, and I know you're doing the best. That says a lot.
It's a
Okay.
team effort. We're gonna get there, and I think it has a lot of potential. We just need to get organized to do it the right way. And I did hear Jody's comment about the 8%. I don't think see
8
that
times.
8
Yeah,
times.
the Department of Ed has
We'll
data.
go and dig into that and come back with a more thorough explanation.
But yeah, I can confirm the Department of Ed data does not indicate we are 8 times the average at all. It's nothing close to that. And
Maybe Jody's still on. Jody, could you send us the data that you were looking at?
yeah, maybe
Yeah,
there's different
email it.
data I'm not aware of, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the report sitting in front of me, so
Yeah,
Please
Thanks,
email.
Ed.
Yeah,
Thank
maybe
you.
I
Dig
missed
in.
something. Thank you, Jody.
no
Okay.
problem.
Is there, oh, it's Matt. He jumped it. Do it. Yes.
Motion to.
Is there a second? And it's Chris that seconds. All in favor?
I
Oh, I don't get to I.
Great, thank you.